starting at 9?
What's that?
Is there one we're starting at 9?
I think so. You want me to go up and remind him since he's already
Yeah.
up?
Yeah.
He had a call. I don't know if he's still on or not.
A little wintry out there today.
I know, wasn't this weekend just nuts?
Yeah, we had lots of snow.
Yeah.
And then it was snowing sideways most of yesterday.
Right? Yeah, all our mountains left. And our neighbors' houses all left.
Yeah,
Yeah, all we could see was white.
it was bad.
Yeah.
Not at my house. We
No,
didn't get no snow.
we just had the wind.
Yeah, just the
all
wind,
this month,
yeah.
Oh,
But we had no moisture.
Yeah.
I had to scrape my windshield this morning. Not happy.
My son and his girlfriend and some other friends actually went camping this weekend.
Oh my
And they
God.
woke up Sunday morning they were up, out by Canyon Ferry Lake, and they woke up to a lot of snow, so.
I used to winter camp, and it's, in my opinion, the best camping. But you gotta be prepared for
Yes.
it, and you're not always prepared for it in the springtime.
No,
No.
no, and they have fun, sit around the fire. It's a lot of fun to sit around the fire at night when it's
Yeah.
chilly and stuff, so.
Oh, yes.
And it didn't start snowing until Saturday or Sunday morning, so they got home pretty quickly.
Pretty early.
Yeah.
I apologize, everybody. I thought our meeting was upstairs this morning.
Sorry.
Favorable. Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Denise, you're up.
All right, I'm Shannon Shanholzer, the Trust Administrator for the Montana Association of Counties Workers' Compensation and Property and Casualty Trusts, and we're going to review the renewal rates for both trusts effective July 1st, 2019. And I appreciate you coming in a little early. It helps with all of my travels and try to get 2 or 3 meetings in a day, so thank you. Okay, the first couple pages of the packet that I gave you are just the agenda items, and we'll go through each of those items as we move through the packet. So if you turn to the 3rd page, it says renewal comparison at the top. We contracted with a new actuary effective July 1st, 2018, and as we'd had the same actuary for 30 years before that, so it was time for a change. And in that process, our actuary also advised us to look into kind of the underwriting part, remodeling the underwriting structure. So we looked at exposures, and this is for all lines of coverage. So on the property side, and the liability is actually experience rated, so it looks at your exposures. There's a base rate for everyone in the pool, and then there's also your individual experience on the liability side that plays into that. So this year is kind of the reallocation part, so there were some ups and some downs. The top 3 lines you'll see are your TIVs. That's your total inventory value. So those are what the amounts are on your schedules. And then on the property contribution, you'll see that you did have a reduction there. We had an increase in the excess rate because we had a pretty just frustrating, I guess, if you will, renewal with our excess carry for property, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit more. So there was an increase, but with the new underwriting structure, the way that it works, it's a lot more sophisticated now. So it used to be there was just base rates for each line of coverage, and then that was what everybody in the pool had. Well, now we take into consideration deductible factors, so you did see a reduction there. And then the liability contribution, that is where we looked at new exposures and then, reallocated everything. So you have a slight increase there. And then the administrative costs are made up of the agent commission and the operational expenses. We did not have any major increases in those percentages this year, they're just a percentage on the net premium. And so overall, you have a reduction of 2.81% of your premium. This is something that, this year there was a lot of ups and downs. There was some that went down, and it was about 50-50, and some went up, and it was just for that reallocation. So hopefully in the future, what we'll be able to do is just provide you more predictive, stable rates, and so that we're not having big swings up and down. So overall, you'll see a 2.81 reduction, so that will help you with your budgeting.
I like that, even every
Yes.
little bit helps.
And these are preliminary, so, when we send out the renewal information, there will be, a recalculate the quote is what it's called, and so it'll depend on if you have any major changes to your property schedules, that would be where there would be a change. Otherwise, there shouldn't be any changes, the liability will be the same. The next couple pages are your individual losses for property and liability. The first page shows the 5-year history. The top is liability, the bottom is the property. Looks like you had a bad property year in 16-17, not sure what we lost there. But overall, your loss ratios, the averages are really good, so keep up the good work there. And the next page just shows those individual losses that are making up those. Oh, the hailstorms, yes, that's what that big one was there. I don't think there's anything just the hailstorms. I don't think there's anything that's a surprise to anyone. Any questions on the losses or the premium there? Okay, now we'll talk about some changes to the manuscript policy. This is the manuscript liability indemnity agreement. This is our liability policy for the pool, and it's manuscripted, which means it's written specifically for our pool, for counties. If you have a commercial policy out there, a lot of times the coverage is not near as broad, and so it looks more at commercial business rather than public entity. And so that's why we manuscript this policy specifically for the broad coverage for the counties and then the special districts. And so this year, we had a couple changes, and the trustees actually they just make the changes, they vote. The board of trustees are the commissioners that you as a membership elect into those positions. The first one is under H, errors and omissions. That first page, there's no changes, but that was just the beginning of it. So the changes begin under employment action, and this language change is the infamous hammer clause, where the way it used to read is if you wanted to discipline or terminate somebody as an employee, you needed to call us first and we would give you the guidance on how to do it without getting sued, hopefully. And if you didn't call us first, then the hammer clause said that we wouldn't cover you. We're removing that because we feel like it served its purpose over the years. 20 years ago, there was a reason for this because, we needed to try to get a hold of everybody. You just can't come into office and then start firing people. There's repercussions for that. So, and then there were some counties out there that just felt that this was us meddling in their business and we shouldn't be telling them what to do, even though that's not what it was. We weren't controlling them, we were just trying to help the counties. So we still have in there, the language still reads that if you want to terminate somebody, call McKinsey, she'll give you the guidance. If you follow her direction and you still have a claim, we will waive your deductible on that. So it's actually just, it's not taking away anything, it's just helping everybody out a little bit. A lot of the larger counties have big HR departments and they didn't want to mess with us on some of this stuff. They want to do things their way and they have an HR attorney on staff, those types of things. But for the majority of the counties that are smaller and rural, they depend on us for the HR part. So And then the next 2 pages have to do with the pollution exclusion. And so we insure 300 special districts, and a lot of them, over half of them, are water and sewer districts. And so this exclusion was being interpreted that if there was a sewer backup, then we wouldn't cover that on the liability side. Well, we can't cover water and sewer districts if that's how our policy is being interpreted. So what this is doing is just clarifying that the pollution exclusion does not apply to accidental discharge of sewage from a pipe or a vessel. So it's just kind of clarifying that language, and it affects 2 of the exclusions there, so. And then now we'll talk about the changes to the bylaws, the membership. If you remember at the Mako Midwinter Conference, the membership in February, the membership did approve some changes to the bylaws. So the bylaws are different than the policy. The trustees can change the policy, the membership has to vote on any changes to the bylaws. The first one is, and I didn't put all the bylaws in here, if you want, if you would like them, I will send them to you and you can read them if you'd like, but I just put the couple pages where there's some changes, so. The first one is the obligations of the members, number 11. This is just making it mandatory that the member counties do have to appoint an independent insurance agent. And you have always done that, you have a great agent here with Julie, but there were some counties who weren't necessarily seeing the benefit of their agent and they wanted to just take it on themselves. They're like, oh, we don't want to do that. Well, what happens is that becomes more and more work for us, and then we have to hire staff for that. So the intention was to have the local agent doing a lot of that stuff, and it's a great partnership that we have. So that is just made that mandatory there. And then the next page has to do with the Board of Trustees composition. And from the very beginning of the pool, back in 1986, there used to be that the executive director of Mako was automatically one of the board members. And everybody else was elected by membership. Well, that has proven over the years to be a little bit of an issue there, because the executive director needs to go to the board sometimes for staffing issues, those types of things. And if he's a voting member, it doesn't make sense. If he's asking, if staff is asking the board to approve, different amounts of money for things, or, there was a little bit of a conflict there. And so what we did is we changed the language, and the membership did approve this, that instead of the executive director, that will be taking off of there, we would ask MSPOA, Montana Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, to nominate somebody who would be a member county sheriff to put them on the board. There's a lot of strain in every county between the sheriff and the commissioners, or the sheriff and sheriff's office and us as the insurer. We're just trying to help mend that relationship a little bit, and we're taking quite a few steps, you'll see, as we move through this. But the first one for this first year was the Ravalli County Sheriff. He's Steve Holton. So he sat through the rate setting meetings, and he was, a voting member. He was taking it all in and really grasping, okay, this is what happens. This is why the rates have to go up, because the losses are going up. And so hopefully that will help mend that relationship a little bit, and then, kind of get everybody on board of understanding it, that you get to choose this. You can choose your fate. We just need to all work together, so. Okay, the next page is, talks about some changes to the excess property. So on the liability side, we're self-insured up to $500,000 for each claim, and then Brit is a reinsurer after that. On the property side, we're self-insured up to $100,000, and then after each claim. And then after that, the Hartford was the carrier, and they would just take over after that. Well, the Hartford renewed us this year and wanted to move us up to $1 million retention. The pool simply cannot absorb $1 million of retention. So we had to go out to quote, to market, and we ended up with Travelers. So there shouldn't be there isn't any changes in the policy except for a couple things here that we're gonna talk about. The first one is, and they left us with a $100,000 SIR. The first one is the margin clause. If you remember, back in 2011 to 13, we've had a 3-year cycle where we did appraisals on every building in the state, all the member counties and the special districts. which is over $2 billion worth of property. The appraisal is quite expensive, the whole process. It cost us close to $600,000 last time. And so the trustees have been kind of putting that off, and we've just been adding the inflationary rate to the replacement cost of buildings. But Travelers looked at that and they really, and so were the carriers. They wanted us to do another round, so this is kind of their way of forcing us to do that. So we will, as soon as I'm done with all these meetings in around July, we'll start the RFP process, and we will have the finalists give presentations to the Board of Trustees in November, and then in April, we'll make sure we're funded for it, and then start the process of another round of appraisals. So the 115% margin clause, what that means is that if you have something on the schedule at replacement value, and there's a total loss. It used to be that no matter what it cost to replace it, they were gonna pay it. Now they're only gonna pay 15% over what was scheduled. So it's, once we go through the appraisal process, we should be able to remove this clause. So it's, like I said, a way for them to force us to spend the money on the appraisals, so.
How often do you think they're gonna require you to do that?
It's only gonna be when you have a total loss on a replacement cost building, which doesn't happen very often, but it does. You know, we had a fire in Sanders County, one of their county shops, a few weeks ago. It was on the schedule at $450,000, and to replace it, I think it cost $460,000, so they were fine. It's just, if you follow the appraisal amount and then the inflations, and that's where you're at, you shouldn't have any issues. But there were some counties that weren't necessarily keeping up with that, because it does increase the premium a little bit, but as your values go up, but our property rates are so low that you really don't see that much of a change. So, you know, if you have a $100,000 building, and it costs $150 to replace it, they're only gonna pay $115, unfortunately. So that's where we wanna make sure that you're looking at your property schedules and making sure everything is matching. And I think Julie's already gone through all of that, so it should be,
Yeah,
you should be fine there.
yeah, we went off that.
And then the,
Let me ask this question.
okay,
So say whoever, you guys decide on when you do the RFP, what if they appraise something you don't agree with it? What's,
there's always a process that just let us know what you don't agree with. We'll get in touch with them, we can set up a meeting or conference calls, whatever. That has happened in the past too. And generally, what we see is, I did have one special district that was a very large water and sewer district around Billings, and they didn't agree with the appraisal, but because they felt that it needed to be higher. And so, you know, we went through the whole process, went through it, and then we increased the rates, or the values on those. But there's always gonna be those, well, we don't think that's worth that. But you also always have the option of scheduling something for a lower stated value. So we have a building in Madison County that it appraised for over $1 million to replace because of the type of building it was, and it's a historical building of some sort, but they were using it for storage. They didn't want to pay premium on that. If it burned down, they were never going to replace it. They knew that. So they put it on the schedule at $300,000, but that's all they're going to get in the event of a total loss. So just so everybody understands that, and we do have those options, will continue, the stated value or the replacement. And then the $250,000 wind and hail deductible, it's actually not a deductible, but it's the SIR. So the pool is absorbing this, not the individual members. So wind and hail has been a really, really bad, it's really affected our rates on the excess carriers. So last year we had a hailstorm that went through Muscle County. It was over $1 million total. We had a tornado in Sheridan County, those types of things. So what this is you'll still have your individual deductible for property, but the pool is absorbing, instead of $100,000 on wind and hail, we're absorbing $250,000. So the actuary took that into consideration as we're looking at, you know, what we need, how we needed to fund for the year. But I already decided that we're not gonna have any hailstorms this year.
Hailstorms.
Good for you.
Okay, then we'll talk about some risk management. These are some of the services that we are working on to provide for you guys. For, you know, as part of the pool, we want you to have some of these special services. So we do have some new staff. Doug Artery is our new loss control specialist. He started in June of last year and he's been kind of going around now. He'll be doing the safety and then the liability part of things, loss control. And then Dan O'Malley is actually our new public safety loss control specialist. And this is again where the trustees funded a position that is gonna work primarily with law enforcement. Law enforcement is our highest loss area for everything. The liability, we have, wrongful incarceration, we have the jail suicides, those types of things, and they all start to add up. And then the property side, they're the ones that are out at night on the roads hitting deer because they have more exposure. And we'll talk about what we're doing about that as well. And then on the work comp side, obviously too, because they're usually working with the unruly people. So Dan's job is going to be working and trying to help with that relationship again with law enforcement. And then also he's been tasked with looking into the law enforcement policies and procedures. So the trustees did fund to purchase a program for every county in the state so that everyone would have the same policies and procedures program. And we haven't come to a final choice on that yet. There's a lot of more research he needs to do, and then also, working with the sheriffs themselves of what do they want to see. One of the complaints that is kind of, you see a lot or you hear a lot of is law enforcement, and we have a high-speed chase that goes through 4 different counties, and every county has a different policy on how to react. And so this would be a way to try to help everybody, some consistency throughout the state. Mobileye, Lexipol and LLRMI are 2 of the top contenders right now for that. So they're programs where it would be kind of it's a software-based online policies and procedures, and they get the updates with the law and those type changes and those types of things. So we look forward to getting that wrapped up and getting everybody implementing those as well.
How was the animal collision program I know we're at our last meeting, they were gonna put some devices on some
Yes.
vehicles. Is it working?
Well, and that's the Mobileye and the animal collision. So the Mobileye, you guys do have that on your, I think 3 of your law enforcement vehicles. And this is all funded by grant money, and then our broker and our excess and reinsurance carriers have put in money because they want to see us bring the losses down too. So the Mobileye is like a second set of eyes in the car, and it's alerting you when you're about to rear end somebody or you're speeding or you're crossing the lines, those types of things. We've had a lot of feedback of, this has made me a better driver because I don't want to hear the stupid thing beep, those types of things. But we've also had 3 different occasions where it saved, or it eliminated a rear end, which auto liability is huge. So that seems to be working. And then the animal collision avoidance, it's called the Hornet program. They're deer whistles is what they are. And we're just getting those on a few, but we've got them on some throughout the state. So we're starting to get feedback on those just now. We also put it on our loss control people within the pool that travel all over, as well as the healthcare trust has 2 marketing girls that are out there. So we put it on theirs too because they can give us honest feedback right away. And one of the girls was actually traveling through the Seeley Swan area, and it was daytime, so she could see the deer, but she said as she got closer, they stopped and they ran away from the noise. So hopefully this is something that's working. So if it saves 1, it's worth it, so one crash. So we'll continue to work on these programs. If we can see that they're working, then we'll start, keep getting the grant money and putting them on more and more vehicles. Because once they're on, then they're on. Then we can just move on to more and more of the counties. So I know that Sheriff Meehan has been really good about letting us, put things on his, the law enforcement vehicles here, so it's worked out good. The regional trainings, these are where we used to contract with Michelle Puggery, and we're no longer contracting with Michelle. We're going to be trying to bring some of that in-house and having McKinsey and our own attorneys do some of this training, and we're gonna kind of mix it up a little bit. So Michelle will still be available if you're, utilizing her for HR duties or for investigations, those types of things, she will still contract with that. But for the regional trainings, we're gonna kind of mix that up a little bit. So we'll see, we don't know what we're gonna do yet. Previously, it's just been a week long where she went and did it throughout the state. We may just do that here and there throughout the state at different times of the year. So hopefully that will help kind of mix things up a little bit too. You know, you can only, I guess, change up human resource training so much, but hopefully we'll be able to have some effect there. The human resource guidance and the guidance on the local government law, that's where we have Mackenzie on staff as an attorney. If you have questions, call her. She's there to help you to you know, not have to manage lawsuits, to not get sued, those types of things, and especially on the HR side of things. The refuse site guidelines, we did send those out. It was a working group that we had. It's just a set of guidelines for you to help, you know, mitigate the losses on the refuse sites as well. That is our second highest loss area. So it just talks about the proper signage, the barriers, those types of things. The facility users guidelines, this is a set of guidelines that we have that has sample language in there for if you're renting out a county-owned building for something, for, you know, that it's a non-county group. And there's a hold harmless language in there, and it talks about what you should be requiring of non-county groups that are utilizing some of your buildings and properties, and what you should be requiring for insurance on those. And that also leads into the special events program. So that's something that we fund, and we have funded for years on this with MMIA, our counterpart for cities and towns. And at the Big I, which is the Independent Insurance Agents of Montana, there's a program there that we fund this, and it helps these nonprofit small groups who don't have a lot of money, or, you know, for weddings and those types of things, helps them access much lower cost special event programs, and it takes the liability off of the county, so when they're using a county building. The BRIT online training, are you guys utilizing that at all? I don't,
We're talking about.
okay, it is there for your use, so. And the contracted land use attorney, this is Tara DePoy. Any issues you have with land use, she's there. We pay her to help you guys. And that, you know, subdivisions, those types of things used to be a lot more of a loss area than it is now. I think everybody's starting to, you know, utilize her or getting the right direction and on those types of things. So the next page is the acknowledgement form, and this is just, again, stating the importance of reviewing your property schedules, and so you sign it and the agent signs off, so that, you know, we've had some counties where they didn't look at their schedule, and they're like, oh yeah, it's fine. Well, then there's a loss, and I'm like, well, why wasn't that on the schedule? Well, we asked you to look at your schedules, please, because we don't know if you own something that's not on there. We need you to look at those. So this is just acknowledging that you've reviewed your schedules. And then we have the agent appointment and agreement, and what this is a three-way business relationship agreement, and it's the only obligation of Mako PCT, the trust, is that we collect the commission through the premium, and then we pay the commission. That's all we do. The agent has the responsibilities here of your schedules, those types of things, and then also, you guys have a good agent and a good understanding of all of this, so you're very fortunate, but there were some who, you know, they really didn't get it, so now this gives them an avenue of, you know, hey, you're not doing this, maybe we need to look at some other options.
And we did all that when we met, when we went through the schedules. We signed everything.
Okay, any questions on the property and liability side? We'll move on to the workers' compensation trust. One of the major changes on the underwriting here is that we did uncap the mod factor. So since the inception of the rule in 1985, the modification factor was capped down at 0.75 and up on the top at 1.25. And what we noticed is that there's a lot of the counties that were down at 0.75 that should have been a lot lower, and they were essentially subsidizing some of the other ones. And when you have a county that's consistently up there, they should have to pay their portion of that instead of the subsidization. So unfortunately, you guys were one that did go a little over, but it's not because you are consistently have a high mod, it's just because you had a bad luck with the one incident. So you are up a little bit up, but fortunately down below, you'll see in the class codes below, we did have a 3% reduction in every class code. So hopefully you won't see a hit on that mod factor because you'll have the 3% reduction in the rates. And then on your losses, you know, outside of the deputy death there, outside of that, you don't have a lot. You're doing well. So if you just keep up the good work in your safety program and those types of things, it's important. The next page is the evaluation. So the trustees did approve $100,000 to be given back for loss control credits. And that's when Amelia comes down and she goes through all of this evaluation. The biggest part that I want you to see is right at the top of that first page where it says management, leadership, and employee participation. We have seen over and over and over the most successful safety programs are the ones where the commissioners buy in, and you buy in from the top down, and then your department heads, and then the employees buy in as well. So she'll be around if she hasn't already to do some of those, and then there is money that's given back to you through the $100,000. It's a percentage thing, and you know, hopefully we ask that you try to put that towards your safety program too. Okay, the next couple pages say the benefits of NACO Workers' Compensation Trust. This is just kind of, I'm not gonna go through all of this individually, but it's just talking about the fact that, you know, there's sometimes there's an angry claimant and they call us and they're like, why are you doing this? And you know, what we need to understand is that work comp coverage in Montana is statutory. We don't get to make up our own rules. So it's all in the codes, and so, you know, the other part of this, though, what we're trying to say is that talking about the importance of reporting your volunteers, especially the firefighters, but any volunteers. You do have a choice on some of your odd volunteers of whether or not you want to cover them for work comp or not, but the way that a volunteer works is you put them on a roster, you track their hours, whoever's doing the payroll reporting, they do this through the work comp payroll reporting process, and you take their number of volunteer hours times a minimum wage in the class code, a relatively low cost way to cover them, because if you don't have that work comp coverage on them for the volunteers, then they can come around on the liability side, and that could be a much larger lawsuit there. Okay, and then we have some changes to the bylaws as well. The two trusts are two separate entities, and so there's two sets of bylaws. And the first part is the board composition. Again, that's where the sheriff is now sitting on the board and not the executive director of MACO. And this is written a little bit differently, so that it's had to be changed in a couple different places there.
Shannon, is the sheriff on this trust also?
Yes.
The one from Ravelli?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And it does help to have the same one, just because of, you know, the travel. We do all of our meetings together, and so it helps. We have a few electeds that the membership elects for the board that are on both trusts, just because that happens to be that way, and it does save a lot in the travel and those types of things. So, and you know, they kind of intermingle to where it's the same idea, is the liability side of it, is you're just trying to bring that down, bring the cost down, keep the rates stable for the counties. And the other change in the bylaws for the work comp was, the work comp trust was created in October of 1985. And so the fiscal year was always October 1 to September 30th. Well, we had that, we have the policy year, which is July 1 to 6/30, and then we had the calendar year of reporting for a lot of stuff at the Department of Labor for the state, because we're regulated by the Department of Labor. So what we did here is we asked the membership to change the fiscal year to July 1, so that it would coincide with the policy year. It's not affecting any of the member counties, it's just helping us out internally with some of the accounting practices. And then the workers' compensation, this is the agent agreement. This is the same thing, it's just written a little bit differently because there's some other responsibilities that are required of the agent for the work comp side rather than on the property and casualty side. So that is all I have. Any questions for me? Sorry if I talk too fast, I've already been at this a week, so I get
No, you do a great job of answering questions before we have a chance to ask them and answering the ones we do ask, so thank you.
Thank you.
And we do have a great insurance agent,
Yes.
Julie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions, being new? No?
Well, thanks, you guys.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Very much.
And have a good day, stay warm.
9:30, Mary Hendrickson, driveway approaches.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Happy Monday. It's nice to see blue sky and today, right?
Yes.
So as you may or may not know, we've had issues, ongoing issues with approaches onto county roads that are not permitted. And some of the, most of it relates to damage to the road, the county road itself. So we've been trying to figure out a way to address the problem. There are a couple things. We have approaches that are put in. There's a culvert in there, but it might only be a 12-inch culvert. It's not big enough. And we have some approaches that have been put in. Most of them have been put in with no culverts. And so one thing that I've been looking at is how can we get the people that need a permitted and therefore approved approach to minimize damage to county roads. And as it is right now, we have an approach permit application. The application fee on that is $125. And what that fee covers actually is our time to go out and do a preliminary approval, and then to go out and do a final approval once a culvert and approach has been installed. Now, not every approach necessarily needs a culvert. It depends upon the location. That's why we go out, we talk to the landowner, we look at the location of the approach, we look at run-on, runoff, topography and all that. So one thing that I've come up with is if we can get people who have an approach as of today that is not permitted and approved, I am willing to waive the approach permit fee and let people purchase the necessary culvert at the cost that we pay for them. So just to give you an idea, an 18-inch round culvert galvanized is about $15 a foot. And bands are about $20 a piece. So it depends upon whether, most driveways can get away with a 20-foot culvert. So we're looking at $300 for a culvert plus another, for that. So if it's, anything larger than that, I think I just submitted a claim for a 30-foot culvert and it was about $450 plus the cost of the band. So 18 inches is our minimum culvert size that we have in our standard for approach permits. So that is one thing that I would like to offer to encourage people to get the approaches put in that they need to. Because it does, we end up paying for it, it does damage roads. And, you know, it costs the county money to go out and make those repairs. And one thing that we will be doing this summer is when we're pulling ditches, we're gonna be sure that our ditches are deep enough as well to manage runoff during storm events. So,
Alright, sounds good. So along with this, I mean, some of the thoughts that we had as well was, you know, that the county could possibly purchase culverts
mhm,
quantity
yes,
at
yes,
a lower cost to help folks out.
yes.
Also that we could possibly help them with the install.
mhm.
Do you still want to try to do that?
You know what,
What
it's,
do you want to do there?
I don't know logistically, thinking about all the culverts
It's a
that
lot,
I know about, there are a lot.
yeah.
And I don't know that we can necessarily do that.
Maybe in some instances where
Yes.
where they're working and
Yes.
great, we can pull that out and they can roll a culvert in.
Yep, we would be happy to
Happy
do
to
that.
do something like that.
Yes,
But some of them, they may have to
yes,
hire somebody to put that in.
right, right,
Plus, there need to be locates.
yes,
You know, we know that they like to run phone lines cross
Yes.
into culverts and things like that,
they do,
so.
yes, they do. And I have looked into, I did get a quote on Friday from a company. I have two more that I'm gonna call because they came in kinda high. They came in higher than what I had anticipated. So, but I am looking at getting a couple of, they call them bunks.
Yeah.
Bunks of culverts, so. And if we can get them shipped up, so I can get about 50, I can get 50, 30, they come in 30, 20 and 30 foot sections, so. We can do that, I can get those costs and bring them down to, you know, $15 a foot. That's actually pretty reasonable, and if we get a semi-load, you know, I'm certain that we could bring them down, even if it's $1 a foot less, it still adds up, so.
I think what's important too, that everybody understands is that new approaches are still gonna have to go through the process
Yes,
of paying for the approach permit
yes,
and the inspections.
yes,
So the waive fee is just gonna be for existing ones,
for existing ones,
kind of help to save our roots.
yes. And I did talk to my road foreman today and asked him to tell the crew that when they notice these, I wanna start tracking these. So when they're out on the roads, write down, you know, the road, if there's an address associated with where the approach is located. I also need to work with Nicole. I realized after talking to TJ this morning that there are subdivision approvals that have only one access point approved for the subdivision. And I know of a couple of instances that we have subdivision approvals, but some of the landowners have put in additional approaches. When only one approach was approved for the subdivision.
If
So-
I can add just a little bit to that, prior to the regs we have today, that was allowed. Today's regs, which were, they're 2 or 3, 4 years old,
Mhm,
they do require an ingress and an egress.
mhm,
So, whereas that is totally 100% correct, it is
Mhm.
changed and corrected
okay,
for any
All right.
subdivisions coming on in the recent years,
okay,
yeah.
all right,
And as far as landowners, you know, that's something we need to address probably through the legal challenge.
mhm,
Which brings up a question. For the grandfathered plan, which I think is brilliant, I do think it needs to not include those who are in violation of subdivision regulations or commission-imposed subdivision
okay,
regulations.
all right,
And then I also think there needs to be an end date. So as
Yes.
long as they register with us by a date certain,
yes,
then we will honor this plan.
yes,
But if they do not come forward at that point, they will revert to having to pay,
okay,
and we'll have to address that as the others.
okay,
And then the other thing is I served as commissioner with Elaine Gravely. We started together, we campaigned and trained together. And what I hear in the back of my head is Elaine saying, what you do for one, you do for all. So I think we need a policy in writing so that the citizens understand who will get the service of install and who will not, and why.
Okay.
So that we don't have somebody on a road we're working on justifiably getting theirs installed, and another person on a less used road not getting theirs installed.
Okay.
They need to have that in writing and
Okay.
understandable.
All right,
I think those are my only points. I
Okay.
think this is a good plan, and you're right, it's costing the county far more with the damage being done to county roads.
it is. Okay, so I will put a policy together, and it'll have an end date on there too. If I can bring that to you in a couple of weeks at a commission meeting, that would be great.
Sounds good.
So, okay. All right. Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Mike Congy, private citizen. I didn't get here until 1966, but we owned some land on Johnson Loop and Muddy Lane. And I remember when we built and put in different things, we'd get permits from different superintendents of the road crew. John Mazzola was one of them. Even Bob was there. Bob was there most of the time. John was there. And Dana and stuff. And those were all paper permits we got to put in approaches at different places. And most of those that we put in were, they said there was no culvert required because there wasn't any runoff there. There wasn't any problem at those times. I don't know if the county has a record of that type of stuff. That's what you're gonna run into. We all paid, they were all legal forms, not 8.5 by 11, 8.5 by 14. Filled some of those out. I could go back and try to look when my folks, I was 16 when we came here and started buying land and farming and stuff. Try to find that stuff, but that's the problem you're gonna run into. There's a lot of people that put in approaches in different ways that got that, went through that process. I think it was about a $25 fee at that time. And then we got a permit and John would sign off with Bob, whoever it was in charge at the time, or Dana, say no, culvert was required, so you fill it in. And for haystacks approaches in different places. So anyway, that's one of those issues. If there's no log, kept track of that stuff at the county shop or the clerk's office, that's gonna be a problem, because now you come back and say, well, you need a culvert there. That was waived at one time. You had permission to put that approach in without a culvert. Now if the county wants a culvert, okay, who's paying for that culvert? Who's gonna buy the culvert? Who's gonna install it? If you're taking away that permission originally it was given, and those are the legal issues you're gonna get into. It's gonna be a big issue.
So we do have those.
Okay.
We do have those approvals. One thing that I do when I have done the preliminary inspection, the pre-installation inspection, is actually write, I don't know if Dana or any of his predecessors were doing it, but actually write the permittee, the applicant, a letter that spells out the conditions of the approval. And if they need a culvert or if they don't need a culvert, I have been putting that in there. So we do have all those approach permits. I do have copies in my office, but I understand there are some in clerk and recorder's also.
It'd be a
So
good
that
place.
is, that
It'd be
is,
good to pull that stuff
yes.
together
right,
and put it in
Yes.
alphabetical order or whatever order you want.
yes.
So it's easy to take sense.
Mhm. Thank you, Mike. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
Appreciate it.
Good work.
Thank you.
And drive careful.
I will. Thank you.
start having restrictions on access.
You
From
mean the,
subdivision.
restrictions for, you mean the ingress and the egress?
Yeah,
I wanna say it was the latest update, which was probably off the top of my head, 2012-ish, give or take. It could have been the regs before that. I didn't know those as well as I do know the ones we have now. So those would be questions for Nicole, but it's not allowed anymore, is my understanding, depending on the size.
it's not allowed to restrict them to one access, or it's not allowed to have individual landowners having access.
It depends on the subdivision, but for the most part, it requires that there be one exit off of a state or a county road, and then that subdivision road service that subdivision.
Okay.
And that not be a county road, but a public road, yeah. And then if it's major subdivision, there needs to be two distinct ingress and egress options for that subdivision. And there is the ability to get a variance, but there's a public process for that.
A little bit ahead here, we'll go ahead with judicial court request from Val for furniture for the courtroom. Requested for 2 tables, 1 workstation, 1 podium, 4 sled-based chairs, 5 long cushions, 3 shorter cushions, and the total is $3,486.
So I sent you guys an email. I invited Val to our office to see the quality of furniture that we get from state surplus and to share what the prices are. So we have chairs, quite comfortable chairs, that were $5 a piece. And we have a table, conference table, that was $50 a piece. There's 2 huge warehouses with podiums, little tables, big tables, chairs, desks, file cabinets, lamps, a whole bunch of stuff, office supplies galore. And so I asked her if she would go to state surplus and put together a price list with used furniture versus brand new. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we did just send out a memo on April 22nd, so last week, that shared what the process would be with the budget. And I think we should follow this, but with the accurate numbers, so the updated numbers with the state surplus furniture. And then what we have in the memo are dates for any special expenditure requests. Those must be submitted. We'll take them all into account. They have to be submitted by June 24th, so that we're well in advance of our memo. And then we will make a decision based on everything put together sometime in July, July 29th. So that gives anybody plenty of time to kind of put together a list of what they want.
So is this request for this next budget year, or is this something she wants to do before the end of the year?
Well, I would, based on the fact that there was talk about a CIP, there isn't a CIP. So if one had a CIP, or extra money in their budget, they could say, hey, I've saved 10% this year, or I've been saving up all these years and I have a CIP with $4,000 and I'd like to spend it on this stuff. We would still probably analyze, do you need brand new, or can you get by with quality used? Just being fiscally responsible on that. But there is no CIP and there is no savings in the budget. So this would have to be an expenditure for next year, next fiscal year, because we simply don't have it in the budget.
I'm not actually reading my
Yeah, and it is a long answer, because you do need to put all those pieces together to understand where we're at. If you look at the tax levy requirements report, the reserves for, that fund have been depleted over the years. We need to build that up, that's why there's no CIP. Even if there's savings this year, those have to go to the reserves first, and then you look at ancillary, costs.
Well, I know that, from last year, when I was sitting out there, I know you guys gave these departments a direction for their reserve. That's what they're supposed to do this year. So I guess we will see. When we get to that point, that everybody's been able to do that.
Right.
I really don't wanna see them spend their reserve. I mean, even though they have extra money in their, at the end of the year of their budget, and that's the whole purpose of building that reserve.
Right.
So they can finally get to that point, when we do have an issue, that they'll have something to fall back on. They don't have to keep coming to the commissioners for more money.
Right. Yeah. We used to be able, and in some departments, I expect we still might, but we used to be able to, the law allows us to have up to 33% reserves. We're below that for most departments, but any department that had, say, 40% reserves at the end of the year, instead of the use it or lose it mentality, what we said was, okay, so for those extra percentages, 34% to 40, you're gonna put that into your own CIP, so that you can start saving for
Right.
big expenditures in the future.
Right.
And it's worked pretty well, but we need to make sure that we have that 33% reserve solidified before we can do that.
Yeah, I think that's the first goal, to getting everybody financially stable again. So I hope you're all looking towards that.
Yeah. And there's no reason too that some of these expenditures can't be spread out over a phasing through the year's process. It doesn't all have to be done at one time.
So we'll wait to see where that's at, see where she's coming from.
I would ask that we submit this with the budget as part of the memo for special requests, and also know that there is an update, likely an update coming with new prices.
Nothing was that Donald's intent, I mean, was her intent to submit this for next year's budget as part of what this was?
I believe so.
Okay.
And I can't answer that.
Okay.
Regardless of any department's request, and anybody can make a request at any time. It's really up to us to determine, is there money in the budget, is there a CIP, or is this part of our budgeting process? But yeah, we had a great conversation on Thursday, and like I said, she just didn't realize what kind of quality they had at State Surplus. She was very open to going with Mike Myers and looking at what they have. And then I think we should just send a memo as a response that, again, incorporated into the budget process, and please look at State